Hey, this is Clint Grove. Welcome to Life Shot Podcast. Before we go anywhere, I want to invite you guys to become part of the Facebook group or our Facebook community. Just follow the link in the description. It's the Life Shot community. Join us if you're interested in improving your health for your physical body as well as your mind and your spiritual life. So it's about really developing ourselves to be more free, more energetic, more joyous, happier, and it's a community for us to inspire one another, invigorate one another through stories and also through tips and tricks and such. So if you're into growing as a person and to become just all around more healthier, and maybe you want to get over certain things, or maybe you just want to improve in certain areas, please join us on the Facebook group there. In this week's episode, we're talking about agroecology. I'm speaking to a man called James Artman, and he's really passionate about food. He grows his own food as much as he can, cooks his own food, and he has a whole lot of recipes that he's really excited about and shares with people. So we're going to talk to James, and he's got a very interesting background. He was a sniper in the American Army, and he helped out in the kitchen there on the army base at some point, and also did training for other guys in sniper school. And he's just all around a very interesting person to talk to, and his passion for agroecology or permaculture, as they call it, is fascinating, and his knowledge around the area is really interesting. So let's have a listen now to the conversation I had with James Artman.
Hey yo, it's the Life Shot Podcast. Change your world and change the world.
James Artman, welcome to Life Shots. So good to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Clint. Thanks for having me.
No problem.
I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to meet people like yourself who've got such a rich background. And you shared with me before we started that you'd like to, just tell us about your passions and also how you became almost, I'm not sure if the word obsessed is right, but about food and permaculture. So it's really good to meet someone who's really passionate about those types of things. So why don't we kick off with just to get a bit of background of your personal story, how it actually ended up you being where you are today. Do you mind just giving us a bit of a taste of that?
Yeah, sure, Clint. So I guess I got started being interested in food as a young person. My grandfather, he had built some big rotisserie pig cookers, and I remember he came over to my house one day and wanted to take me out and teach me how to butcher a hog and cook it. Mm-hmm. And he took me out to a farm, and we killed a pig and
was that quite scary?
Butchered it and cooked it. And
I can imagine that being quite scary. Right?
Well, what's funny about it is I guess my mother didn't realize that I was actually going to be going out to the farm, and then shooting the pig. And
she must have
got kind of mad at my grandfather. Yeah, I was, I think, 9 years old.
Wow.
But I mean, no, honestly, like, I thought it was fascinating. I loved it. And then, I did cook with him, both him and my grandmother. She taught me how to make fried chicken, and so I started getting into cooking food when I was young, and kind of always stuck with that, and worked at a couple restaurants when I was in high school, and then right out of high school I joined the military, and I was in the Army for 8 years, and became a sniper in a special operations unit, and taught sniper school.
That's it. That's a very
you know,
interesting.
and I continued to,
No,
yeah, I
is it-
continued to cook while I was in the Army. Actually, on one of my deployments, things started getting real rough for all of us, you know, with war. And I discovered that I could put in a memorandum to the chow hall and go there and like request, because they had T-bones that they would service in the dining facility over there. But the way that they prepared them, they were awful. I mean, it was just like well done, like,
oh,
you know,
man.
shoe leather. And so I put in this request and to get 50 T-bones. And I went to the dining facility and I marinated them all and put them in the walk-in. And there's a big giant grill there on the base. And I went through all the work to talk to some locals to source some charcoal. You know, that was an ordeal.
I bet
Getting
you
that
the
into the
guys
front
loved
gate.
it. I bet you they loved it, right? They were like, oh, finally some good meat.
Yeah, I mean, I cooked T-bone steaks to order for all the guys, and they just absolutely loved it. Yeah.
Oh,
So,
you must have been popular, man.
but I started to, you know, I got some medical training when I was in, you know, mostly trauma medicine, and I did start to become this, you know, kind of caretaker of all the guys. You know, like whenever they got sick, I mean, yeah, I mean, I just, you know, I was good at medicine, you know, in the military, and started, you know, being that guy to always be taking care of everyone. And, you know, once I decided it was time for me to get out, I was stationed at Fort Benning, Georgia. You know, I was trying to, you know, envision what my version of the American dream looked like, you know, and, you know, what am I going to do with myself? You know, I wasn't going to continue to be a sniper, you know?
Yeah.
So when I started to think about that, what my life looked like in my head, me being happy, you know, I imagined being on my own land and growing food. I began doing a lot of mushroom hunting when I was in the military.
Awesome.
So I got super into mycology. A guy named Paul Stamets, I started reading his books. He's actually a very well-renowned mycologist. And from doing all that, you know, it kind of inspired me to discover permaculture. Actually, there was a page of one of his books that depicts how mushrooms could be used to complete the, you know, cycle of nutrients, you know, and resources on a farm, and create this what he called a Stemesian mycotopia, but it was basically a permaculture. And he kind of challenged his readers to investigate this more. Like, how could you do this? You know, like put this all into action. And so it inspired me to do some reading. And then I, you know, eventually started reading about permaculture, and it just made a lot of sense to me.
How long's your journey been though in the permaculture? Has it been a long time coming? Have you been studying this for years, or is it just some newly developed thing for you?
Well, it was when I was getting ready to get out of the military that I discovered what permaculture was.
How long ago was that, James?
So that was, this was probably in 2009.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So about 10 years that I've been reading about this. And so anyways, you know, once I discovered that and really kind of started diving into it, I decided I wanted to, you know, study science in school, you know, kind of understand the more basic fundamentals of science. So that way, because I envision myself learning this, you know, doing it, sharing it with other people. I've always enjoyed teaching and sharing knowledge with others. And so go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I remember us speaking previous to this, and you mentioned that coming out of the being a sniper in the army, and you have to deal with those traumatic things that you've been through. And I remember you said that the food or what you've been doing has actually helped you to overcome PTSD. You know, can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I started studying science in school, and was doing research, and I started to experience some, symptoms of PTSD. These flashbacks, trouble sleeping, a bit of depression, and unfortunately, my wife of 10 years and I, split up. So that was really hard on me, and I was in the middle of studying genetics and just kind of started falling apart. But I had to write this paper on the molecular basis of cancer, and after all my research, I discovered that what inflammation is in the body, and that, the tumor microenvironment is inflammatory, and, is a major cause of cancer, and pretty much every other chronic inflammatory disease state. And I continued, and then I realized that the brain becomes inflamed, and, that inflammation manifests in symptoms like ADHD, depression, anxiety, and discover the connection to the gut microbiome.
So that elevates your PTSD if your brain's inflamed. Is that what you think happened?
It most definitely does. I mean, it at least exacerbates the situation and makes it difficult for you to, be more resilient to the effects of stress. So so that was, a big thing for me, because I hadn't really paid that much attention to human biology. I was more interested in, the fungus and stuff in the soil and plants. And so I started working at a nutrition store, and under the tutelage of a retired pharmacist, started investigating, vitamins and every other nutraceutical on the shelf, to a molecular scale, and with the point of, improving the function of my mind, so that way I could get back to where I was, feeling happy, focused, productive. And
That's
then
amazing.
I read a book by Dr. Mark Hyman.
Oh, yes.
Called The Ultramind Solution. And then I became aware of functional medicine. And that was really a huge turning point for me, because it was the most compelling thing I had read about how to heal yourself.
But now, how did you?
And so,
but James, how did you actually get? You're in a point where you're kind of depressed. You're feeling down. But how did you bring yourself to study that? I mean, it must have taken a lot of willpower, a lot of energy to say, you know what, I'm feeling down, but I got to fix myself. I mean, how did you do that? What did you have to do inside of yourself to do that?
Well, that's a good question, Clint. I mean, honestly, there's been a lot of times where I've been, like you said, really down, feeling down about myself, feeling hopeless, and just kind of falling back on to the one thing that I do have control over in my life, which is my nutrition. I have the ability, regardless of what's going on in my life, to take care of myself. And even though when you're in that state of depression and not feeling good, you kind of get that self-pity mode going, where you're like, I don't want to take care of myself, but I would realize that was going on, and have all these different nutrients on my shelf, and take some vitamin D and go outside, do the things I knew that would make me feel better, go for a run, and and it works.
Do you think there's a bit of your training as a sniper that you're quite disciplined, that helped you to maybe instill a bit of those practices that helped you? What do you think?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, people have asked me before what's the best thing I got out of the military, and honestly, it's having all the opportunities to have to overcome mental limitations, because that quit sound that comes in your head when you're, on a 12-mile ruck march with 70 pounds on your back, you don't have the option to quit. You just don't listen to it. and you just keep pushing yourself, and you finish, and you realize, after you take a break for 5 minutes, you're like, I'm good. I could go do 5 more miles. You know what I mean? So you start to realize that you can do a lot more than what your brain thinks. And so I just kind of started applying that to other areas of my life.
So you've got this thing called take control, haven't you? You've got this hashtag you want to promote. And is this part of taking control? It's about taking control of your life, taking control of your nutrition. How would you explain that from your point of view?
Well, it's take charge. And it came from, just a lot of conversations I've had with other veterans, friends, family, other people in my life. I mean, you're right in the beginning of this to say it's an obsession. I mean, kind of, I would say so. Like, I read about this, talk about it all the time, everything surrounding food. But, it is like you do have to take charge of your happiness, and you can take charge of your health, because no one else is going to do it for you. And when you can take control of yourself and own the conversation with yourself in every way, take control of those kinds of things in your life, and do the things that that you want to, be the person that you say you are, it feels great.
So can I ask you something about
feedback loop?
Yeah. Can I ask you about the, because, so for some people it's like, well, I enjoy donuts, I enjoy pizza, I don't want to give that up. But from your point of view, it sounds like you're really excited about these healthy foods, because not only are they good for you, but also it sounds like, when I picture you and you're cooking and you're in your kitchen there on the farm, it just looks like this beautiful place where you create beautiful food and awesome tastes. Is that the reality? What is it like for you? Is food amazing to you, these healthy foods?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love food. I've really spent a lot of time preparing my own foods, because, if you want to eat healthy, you pretty much have to. For the most part, it's hard to go out and eat anywhere and find something that's truly healthy, whether it be kind of oils they're using or food cooking techniques. So, yeah, absolutely. I love it. I buy the pantry is the key. So that's my main area of focus, is making sure that I have, all kinds of spices, Asian spices, and, I make all my own spice blends sometimes. But it's having a lot of fats. I have avocado oil, olive oil, grapeseed oil, coconut oil, and I use grass-fed butter, always having that stuff on hand, bone broth, stuff like that. And then just good vegetables. And I just sort of, when you have nothing but good food in your house, it's pretty easy to make something that's promoting health,
Yeah.
I'll only put,
Yeah, I agree with that.
I make a lot of great food.
Yeah, I made a casserole the other day, and I just put a whole lot of ghee butter in. So that's clarified butter. And with a bit of coconut oil as well. And it really enhances the flavor, but not just that, but also keeps you fuller for longer. And we know that those oils are good for you. And the fact that you fuller, you got a full stomach for a longer period means you don't snack in between. So that was a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely try to incorporate fat into every single meal that I have. So I have that metabolic flexibility to burn both fats and sugars. And it definitely keeps me from impulsively eating or having those kind of hedonic hunger cravings that are so hard to work against.
So as a man from which area of the States are you from? I mean, do they eat a lot of meat down there?
Oh yeah, I'm from East Tennessee. So everybody's very prideful about their Southern cooking here, fried chicken and waffles and stuff like that.
So you've been on this journey of food and whole, not processed food that you've grown yourself. A lot of it you grow yourself. How has that impacted the amount of meat that you've eaten, say, compared to 10, 15 years ago?
Well, honestly, my meat consumption has decreased quite a bit, and really for several reasons. One is, I'll only eat clean sources of meat, which there was a transition period for me into that. But the more I began to learn and understand what confined area farming operation meat is doing to your body, the more I was like, no thanks.
Yeah.
So I only, and that stuff's more expensive and not always as available. And I just don't need to eat that much of it. I eat a lot of food, Clint, but most of it's vegetables and fat,
Yeah.
So there's that. And then there's also, mTOR, which is the mammalian targeted rapamycin, which is this biochemical pathway that accelerates and promotes growth. So when you consume the branched chain amino acids that are found in higher concentrations in meat, it triggers that. And so I like to take advantage of autophagy by doing intermittent fasting.
Mm-hmm.
There's periods of time where I avoid eating meat, and just for that purpose alone.
So explain autophagy to our listeners. I know the concept very lightly, of course, but explain the concept of autophagy and intermittent fasting, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So when we're in a fed state, which this newer phenomena of feeling like we need to eat 3 meals a day with snacks in between, like it is a new thing, and we've evolved as humans for a long time where it's kind of more feast or famine. As hunter-gatherers, you're not getting 3 squares a day.
Yeah.
So our biology, and actually the biology of even microorganisms, is set up to, when nutrients are not available, to kind of switch gears, conserve resources, and then go into a repair and regeneration mode.
Hello.
And part of that is the process of autophagy, which means self-eating, basically. And our bodies will start to recycle, this kind of junk that accumulates, old proteins, subcellular components, organelles, maybe whole cells, and break them down into their smaller parts and then redistribute that to make new proteins and new organelles and new cells. Well, this process is a natural thing that our bodies can go into, what we have in the past. But if you're always in a fed state, that's never happening. So by doing intermittent fasting, basically, as I've kind of heard it described before, it's like taking out the trash overnight. As that junk kind of accumulates, you have old cells that are dying, things that are aging. Sometimes I liken it to like a farm with an old farm truck. It's, after a while, it's burning oil and not very fuel efficient, but you're trying to keep it going, and just taking advantage of your body's natural processes is kind of like getting in that new farm truck.
That's brilliant.
Now it's running a lot more efficiently.
Yeah, I was just thinking about with the training that we're going through as health coaches. They speak about the body going into a repair state actually detoxifies itself every night. So if you give yourself enough rest between, your last meal. So let's say your last meal is at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and your next meal being, probably 7, 8 o'clock the next morning, giving your body a good amount of time to detoxify during your sleep as well. And especially if you get to sleep at a good time, let's say before 10 o'clock, I think you're doing yourself some massive favors. What would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you go to sleep, your gut goes to sleep as well. So, you know, you want to give yourself plenty of time, you know, for those digestive enzymes to break your food particles down and allow you to, you know, kind of absorb those nutrients at night instead of, you know, people have a lot, especially if you're eating lots of meat, you know, taking big bites, you know, that big stuff ends up in your colon, can putrefy and cause more inflammation in your gut. So yeah, definitely. I mean, I've seen research before that, you know, suggests that eating, you know, several hours before you go to bed will help increase the amount of deep sleep that you get.
Yeah. So that's a good tip for our listeners. James, let's move on to permaculture, which is what I would like to hear from you about how you do that yourself in your area and how you promote it outside of your immediate vicinity there. And then we'll talk about how artificial intelligence also affects that maybe afterwards. So do you just want to give us a brief idea of what permaculture is for those who don't know it? In fact, I spoke to you about 2 weeks ago and you mentioned the word and I was like, what is permaculture? But I spoke to somebody else subsequently here locally and they're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. I'm like, okay. So obviously I was in the dark. So for other listeners who are kind of in the dark about what permaculture is, can you give us a breakdown of what it is and how it's beneficial to us?
Sure. So permaculture means permanent agriculture. And basically, actually, there's this new kind of emergent term that I've been using lately that doesn't really make, because, you know, people that do know of it kind of sort of think about hippies standing around in circles making, you know, corn cob huts and stuff. But it's much more than that. So this term agroecology is what I kind of like, because it's a simple definition. It's ecologically informed agriculture. And because that's basically what permaculture is. It you know, utilizes nature and observation of nature to build food production systems that are regenerative and, you know, can basically take care of themselves. So it's a beyond organic method of growing food, utilizing and taking advantage of water harvesting potential on the land to make the systems drought tolerant, so they don't rely on irrigation or any kind of chemical input, you know, where you maximize biodiversity to bring in pollinators, some bird predation, you know, to eat the bugs, and create this beautiful system of balance that is massively productive. And, you know, to me, it's a great way to connect with your food. You know, there's so many different types of foods that you don't see in markets that are easy to grow, you know, that are disease resistant, drought tolerant, things like sea buckthorn and aronia and stuff that people have never even heard of.
I've never
that
heard
have, you know, so many different, you know, antioxidant profiles and, you know, lots of minerals, you know, where a lot of people are deficient in those because of our agriculture and the stresses of our society. So, I mean, you know, the health benefits of having a food system like this are immense, you know, and again, after working with lots of people in overcoming chronic inflammatory disease, I really honed in on the thing that really makes an impact for people. It, you know, and makes healthy lifestyle choices a sustainable endeavor is the relationship with food. You know, having that new relationship with food where there's values associated with where my food comes from. what's in it, and thinking of it as something that promotes health, that is nourishment for your body, versus being hedonic, where, you're just eating something because it tastes good, but it makes you feel like crap.
Yeah.
And getting that dopamine rush, and just, living by your senses and not really having that control over that, and letting the food have control over you. So, and it's a wonderful thing to walk through a food forest, which is one of the kind of concepts of permaculture, where you can build these basically forests of food where you have, ground covers, shrubs, vines, middle and upper canopy, trees all supporting each other. Leguminous trees that are nitrogen fixing, that are putting plant soluble nitrogen in the ground for your fruit trees. You got, cranberry and creeping thyme and rosemary and goji berries, passion fruit, hardy kiwis. All this stuff can be grown and create abundance for you. Just in the size of somebody's backyard, you have, a lot of food.
That's the reality though. Like I live in a village though, it's quite small, 2,500 people, but we still live in a very residential way, in that we don't have, we've got decent sized gardens. They're not massive, but the kids have got to run around. But we, where I live, it's very flat. And there's not a lot of trees around, I would say. How do we should I grow my own little vegetable patch? I mean, I don't have big trees to, like you spoke about. It almost sounds like it's like a forest there, but we don't have that type of thing here. What would you suggest for someone in my type of area?
Well, let me tell you. So one of the things that I'm working on locally here in Tennessee is getting a community food forest built in a rural community outside of Knoxville. Honestly, I'd like to build them in every rural community in the country, but this is where I'm kind of focusing on. It's typical of rural America, has problems just like anywhere else. Low-income people not having access to fresh food, food desert situation. And then the majority of the people that are coming to food pantries, have some kind of chronic inflammatory disease state. There's children that aren't getting fresh food. So community food forest is cool, but I don't really want to stop there, really, because I want to create and build more social capital and some rural prosperity by developing local agroecology as a practice in the area, because here it's hilly, so a lot of the agriculture here is mostly people raising beef, because you can't really use a machine and monoculture row crops on these mountainsides, but it's perfect for this kind of food production with systems of swales and dams and fruit trees. But even in a flat area like yours, in a small village, you can build a, 1 or 2 acre food forest, or a couple of them. And by design, start establishing the system. And within, 5 years, as everything kind of develops and matures, you'll have lots of food. And it's a system of growing food that continuously can be added to. As it matures and the soils become healthier, and there's more nutrients in the soil, you can plant more fruit trees in there, and it doesn't have to all happen at once. The community can kind of come together and bring, a blackberry bush or an apple tree. You can kind of always continue to add to these things. And then you have basically a free source of food, and it can also function as a massive contributor to food pantries, and used as an educational tool for for children or just anybody that wants to learn how to grow foods.
Yeah.
You can teach people about nutrition while you're there. I would like to, develop this kind of thing for the community here, where there's a commercial kitchen where we could teach, some culinary classes, because, like another part of healthy eating, sustainable healthy eating, is understanding how to feed yourself. A lot of people that want to start making better health choices with their food, they're like, I don't know what to eat. They're asking me for recipes. And so I'm like, you really don't need recipes if your pantry's set up and you're buying whole foods, just kind of combine things. And so, there's stuff to teach people.
Yeah.
You could use it as a tool to teach people how to cook and prepare food, and just use it as a model for other people that want, young farmers. There's kind of a epidemic in our country right now that the average age of a farmer here is 65.
Wow.
And most of that, and that's like, less than 1% of the population. And most of that's monoculture farming.
So let's talk about
which is not really something to break into.
No, it's not, and I don't think it's sustainable, especially the way the world's developing now. It may take a long time to get to a kind of a utopia where, artificial intelligence will take away the need for certain types of farming. We can already see that with some automated machines going up and down during the harvest, for example. I mean, I don't know a lot about it, but I know that there's definitely some of that happening.
They can use satellites to run a combine and stuff.
Yeah, and so what you're talking about is something I also found out about here in the UK, United Kingdom, where there is a program called Incredible Edible, and this lady decided, she's also been on TED Talks, she decided that she would start building little garden or vegetable patches around the village. In fact, it's not a village, it's more of a town, so it's quite a big town, probably 20,000 people in it. And they got vegetable patches everywhere. And the idea is that the food is free for anybody to take. And they've got these things spotted around the entire town. And so that idea is great because it's good for kids. Like you said, it's good educationally. The kids can get an idea of what's growing here, how good is it for your body. And I think that's so powerful because even here in our village, my kids go to the school here. And there's an allotment there's 2 allotments in our village, quite big ones. So they go down to the allotment and they learn about what's growing on the allotment and what type of food that is. And that's something that I never got exposed to as a child myself. And I think if we could promote more of that, it's really going to help our young children to choose the right foods to eat. And people like yourselves, I mean, the work that you're doing and the work that you want to do sounds so educational, so inspiring that I think this is the way forward for communities, especially in the light of what's to come in the future. Like if I think mass farming is something that we should kind of not promote in a way. I don't know how you feel about that because, we're processing all this food and it's food that we don't really need per se. We don't need massive fields of corn, massive fields of soy. What do you think about that aspect?
Well, I completely agree. I mean, to be frank, I feel like, conventional industrial agriculture is one of our biggest downfalls as humans because it has separated us so much from our food and, has resulted in massive chemical inputs, which I feel like everyone can agree are not beneficial. Mm-hmm. They're not health promoting of ourselves or our environment.
Yeah.
And it's just a result of one way of thinking, like this is how you grow food, but there's this other thing going on and it's happening all over the world in little pockets, especially in less developed areas where they don't have, lenders and, other political people or some kind of influence preventing them from being able to utilize more sustainable and regenerative agriculture practices, whether it be silvopasture, or on a cattle farm, creating useful timber stands and, perennial fodder besides just feeding them grain, just stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I agree that monoculture is definitely not beneficial to us. And honestly, grain is what's driving the majority of chronic inflammatory disease.
Yeah.
The standard American diet, is causing diabetes in children. I mean, that's extremely alarming. Nutrition for children is, I'm kind of tough on people about it because, it's like it's up to you to like guide them, and have the discipline. Most children, they don't want to eat vegetables. They love the sugary snacks. They're inundated with things that I would never eat, and parents just gladly give it to them because it's easier.
Yeah.
I've even seen people. I was gonna say I've had clients, that I'm working with, and like go to do a kitchen detox with them, and get rid of some stuff and then they're like, don't want me to look in their cupboard, or they're making excuses for things. So like, oh, that's for the kids.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, well, if it's hurting you, why feed it to your children? Have more potential.
It's a tough thing. It's really tough. And for the people who don't know, you've got a 9-year-old son or stepson, and so you also help him to choose the right thing, right? I mean, he probably does have a bit of sugar now and then, but how do you deal with that from his perspective?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's challenging. I have to get creative. I try to include him as much as possible in, the types of foods that we're getting at the store. Like basically he gets to help me pick produce out. But still, I have a hard time getting him to eat his vegetables. So sometimes I'll get creative with it and, hide some lion's made mushroom powder and, some taco meat, make some zucchini noodles, try and make food that looks familiar to him, but is healthy, and that's really the main thing that I do with my cooking is I try to make things that are health promoting and nutrient dense, while also tasting fantastic. So he's a pretty lucky kid, honestly, because I cook really good food for him all the time. I try to sneak fats into his food as much as possible.
He'll thank you later.
But yeah, right. Yeah, I'm constantly I shared. I've made him watch Jamie Oliver's TED Talk where he talks about the sugar and chocolate milk at school.
Oh yeah.
He's dumping wheelbarrow of sugar cubes on the ground. I'm like, look, don't drink that stuff at school.
So that's really good. So James, I think just last question before we wrap it up, and I'll be really keen to talk to you again at some point in the future about this because it's your expertise and knowledge around this area is great, and it's you're very enthusiastic about this area, which is it's so good to talk to someone who's passionate about these types of things. And how are you going forward now? So my last question is, what's your steps? I know you've spoken about it briefly already about what you want to have going in the communities, but how are you going about it in your everyday, in the next, say, 1 year from now? Where do you hope to be? What do you hope to achieve doing what you're doing right now?
Well, at the moment, I am really getting a lot more involved in the community, beginning to learn more about my local food bank and, the people that are working there, talking to the local community colleges, bank lenders, engineers, architects, landscape designers, and other community leaders about the value of doing this kind of work. and the benefit that is there and the possibilities and opportunities that are associated with it to solve some of our biggest problems. So I'm doing that, and I want to continue to work with people on building some community food forests, that people can see, begin to make that something that is a familiar concept for people, so that they want more of it.
Yeah.
And inspire people, have classes and teach and educate people on how this stuff works. Build these. I mean, I'm building some residential systems. One right now I'm actively working on is about 4 acres, like right in the middle of town. And it's going to be a beautiful fruit orchard, terraced garden beds, lots of native plants, massively productive.
Sounds exciting. I've seen some of your diagrams. So where can people see some of your work? Or is it not been publicly available just yet?
Yeah, I'm working on a website right now. I should have it actually probably published by the end of the week. But I have some stuff. I post recipes and the other things I'm working on Instagram. Just James Artman on Instagram.
Yep.
And I mean, the more projects that I work on, I'll have stuff up there. But yeah, I'm getting pretty excited about doing this stuff. Pretty much everyone I talk to is has probably most of them never heard of this kind of thing, and very quickly can see that this is something that is going to
the next step in our evolution.
Yeah. I mean, it'll create resilient communities for our next generations.
Definitely.
I feel like it's the most meaningful work that I feel like that I could do. So thank you so much, Clint, for having me on your podcast to share this with other people. Definitely.
And even though we are separated by the Atlantic Ocean, I think that there's some similar things going on in the UK, but not enough of it's going on. And so I think that us working together is going to be a good thing. We can learn from you that side, and it also, maybe someone's going to be inspired who listens to this today to start something in their own community. And I would suggest that they look at the website Incredible Edible, which I'll post also in the description. And that's a way to also get involved with your communities around. I have no reason to promote that idea, but it's just because I think that they're doing something really good, which is similar to what James has spoken about today. So James, great to have you on the show, and do look forward to it. Another chat sometime. Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to share, if you want, I can send you some great links, and I would encourage any of your listeners to look this stuff up. There's plenty of videos on YouTube of people doing this kind of work, and it really is fun to watch. It inspires, imagination in your own mind of what possibilities you have in your area, and it's definitely accessible for everybody. So it's definitely a good idea. So check out the links in the description, and get excited about what's the new buzzword? Not permaculture, but agro. What did you call it?
Agroecology. Yeah.
Agroecology. Cool, man.
Yeah.
All right,
I feel
James,
like it's more palatable for the naysayers. Yeah.
Agroecology. Love it. So let's keep talking about agroecology. Good stuff. And James, you have a good day, and thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah. Thank you, Clint.